The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone courtyard of Windsor Castle as Sergeant Michael Thompson adjusted his red ceremonial tunic. He had been a member of the Queen's Lifeguard for 12 years, but today felt different. His horse, a magnificent black gelding named Thunder, seemed to sense something special in the air too. The powerful animal stood perfectly still, his dark eyes alert and ears pricked forward. Thunder was not just any horse. He was one of the most experienced ceremonial horses in the royal stable, known for his calm temperament and unwavering discipline. Standing 17 hands high, with a glossy black coat that shone like polished obsidian in the morning light, he commanded respect from both visitors and fellow guardsmen alike. But beneath his imposing exterior lay a gentle soul that few people ever got to witness. The castle grounds were already bustling with activity. Tour groups gathered near the main entrance, cameras clicking as they captured the iconic red-uniformed guards and their magnificent mounts. Children pressed their faces against the barriers, wide-eyed with wonder at the sight of the ceremonial horses. Parents whispered explanations about the ancient traditions they were witnessing, while teenagers tried to get the perfect selfie with the stoic guards in the background. Michael noticed a small group approaching from the visitor center. Unlike the typical tourists, this group moved more slowly and deliberately. A woman in her 30s wearing a bright yellow volunteer badge led the way. Behind her, several adults and children of various ages followed, some walking independently while others used wheelchairs or mobility aids. Their faces showed a mixture of excitement and nervousness as they approached the ceremonial area. The volunteer, Sarah Chen, had been organizing these special visits for 3 years. As a former teacher who now worked with a local charity supporting families with special needs children, she understood the importance of creating meaningful experiences for her group. She had contacted the castle months in advance, explaining her request for a more intimate encounter with the ceremonial horses and guards. Thunder's ears twitched as the group drew closer. Something about their energy was different from the usual crowds. While most tourists kept their distance behind the barriers, chattering loudly and jostling for position, this group approached with quiet reverence. The children among them moved with varying degrees of coordination, some stimming with their hands, others requiring gentle guidance from their caregivers. 8-year-old Emma, who had Down syndrome, was the first to spot Thunder. Her face lit up with pure joy, and she began signing excitedly to her mother. Emma had been fascinated by horses since she was tiny, collecting toy horses and horse books, but had never been this close to a real one, especially not one as majestic as Thunder. Her mother, Linda, felt tears prick her eyes as she watched her daughter's reaction. 12-year-old Marcus, who was on the autism spectrum, stood perfectly still about 10 feet away from the horse. His keen eyes took in every detail of Thunder's appearance. From the precise way his mane was braided to the shine of his ceremonial tack, Marcus had an encyclopedic knowledge of horses and had been preparing for this visit for weeks, memorizing facts about the different breeds used by the Queen's Lifeguard. Thunder seemed to sense the special nature of his visitors. His usual rigid, military bearing softened slightly, though he maintained his disciplined stance. His dark eyes, usually focused straight ahead during ceremonial duties, began to shift gently toward the approaching group. There was an intelligence in his gaze that seemed to recognize something unique about these particular humans. Michael had been briefed about the special visit, but he wasn't prepared for the emotional impact it would have on both him and his horse. As a father himself, he understood the challenges these families faced daily. He had watched his own nephew, who had cerebral palsy, struggle with simple tasks that others took for granted. The courage it took for these families to venture out and create normal experiences for their children touched something deep in his heart. The volunteer, Sarah, stepped forward and spoke quietly to Michael, explaining the group and asking if it would be possible for some of the children to get a closer look at Thunder. She emphasized that all the children had been prepared for the visit and understood the importance of being calm and quiet around the ceremonial horses. As the group settled into a semicircle around Thunder and Michael, something magical began to happen. The horse's usual ceremonial stiffness seemed to melt away, replaced by an almost paternal gentleness. His breathing slowed, and his massive head lowered slightly as if he was trying to make himself less intimidating to his small visitors. Thunder had worked with hundreds of different guards over the years, had stood motionless during countless ceremonies, had endured the chaos of state processions and the excitement of royal events. But never had he felt quite like this. There was something pure and honest about the energy radiating from these children that called to every protective instinct in his equine heart. The morning air was filled with a sense of anticipation as this unlikely group came together in the shadow of the ancient castle walls. None of them could have predicted the profound connections that were about to unfold, connections that would touch hearts and create memories lasting a lifetime. Emma took her first tentative step closer to Thunder, her small hand clutching her mother's fingers tightly. Her eyes never left the magnificent horse as she moved forward, her face showing a mixture of awe and determination. Linda felt her daughter's grip tighten with each step, but also noticed how Emma's usual fidgeting had completely stopped. The child was completely focused, more calm and centered than her mother had seen her in months. Thunder seemed to sense Emma's approach before anyone else did. His large head turned slightly in her direction, but he moved with such deliberate slowness that it appeared almost choreographed. His nostrils flared gently as he caught her scent, and something in his ancient equine wisdom recognized the pure innocence radiating from this small person. Michael watched the interaction with growing amazement. In all his years of service, he had never seen Thunder react this way to visitors. The horse's usual military precision remained intact, but there was an added layer of gentleness that seemed to emerge from somewhere deep within his spirit. It was as if Thunder understood that these visitors needed something different from him, something more tender than his usual ceremonial stoicism. Meanwhile, Marcus had positioned himself at the perfect angle to observe Thunder's conformation. His sharp eyes catalogued every detail, from the horse's perfectly groomed tail to the way his muscles rippled beneath his glossy coat. But unlike his usual rapid-fire questions about technical details, Marcus remained quietly absorbed in his observations. His mother, Janet, recognized this as one of his focused moments when the world around him faded away, and he became completely absorbed in his area of interest. Sarah, the volunteer coordinator, watched the scene unfold with professional satisfaction, mixed with personal emotion. She had seen many children with special needs struggle in new environments, overwhelmed by unfamiliar sights, sounds, and sensations. But something about the presence of these majestic horses seemed to have a calming effect on the entire group. Even the children who typically required constant movement and stimulation were standing quietly, mesmerized by the gentle giants before them. A young boy named David, who usually struggled with anxiety in crowded places, had moved closer to the group without anyone noticing. His typical nervous habits had disappeared, replaced by calm fascination. His occupational therapist, who had accompanied the group, made mental notes about this unexpected response. David's transformation was remarkable, and she began to wonder about the therapeutic potential of these interactions. Thunder's breathing had become even more measured and deep. Each exhale seemed to create a bubble of calm that extended outward, encompassing the children gathered around him. His ears, which usually remained alert for commands from his rider, had swiveled forward toward his visitors, showing his genuine interest in their presence. Emma had now moved close enough to smell Thunder's warm, hay-sweet breath. Her eyes grew wide with wonder as she realized just how massive he was. Standing next to his powerful legs, she barely reached his chest, yet she felt no fear. Instead, there was something profoundly comforting about his presence, like standing next to a gentle mountain that would never move or change. Linda watched her daughter with tears threatening to spill over. Emma had been through so many challenges in her young life, from medical procedures to educational struggles to social situations where she felt different from other children. But here, in this moment, she was simply a little girl amazed by a beautiful horse. The barriers that usually existed seemed to have dissolved completely. Michael found himself holding his breath as Emma raised her tiny hand toward Thunder's neck. The horse saw the movement and lowered his head even further, bringing his massive face within reach of the small child. His eyes, usually sharp and alert for ceremonial duties, had become soft and kind, filled with an ancient wisdom that seemed to recognize the purity of the moment. The other children in the group began to move closer as well, drawn by the magnetic calm that thunder was creating. A teenage girl named Sophie, who had been hanging back due to her social anxiety, found herself taking small steps forward. Her support worker smiled with surprise, knowing how difficult new social situations typically were for Sophie. Thunder's response to each child was subtly different, as if he could sense their individual needs. For the children who seemed overwhelmed, by his size he kept his head low and moved even more slowly. For those who appeared confident, he allowed them to approach more closely, always maintaining his gentle demeanor, but showing slightly more of his personality. The morning sun had climbed higher, casting a warm glow over the entire scene. Other tourists had begun to notice the special interaction taking place and were gathering at a respectful distance to watch. Even the usually businesslike castle guards found themselves pausing in their duties to observe this unexpected moment of connection. Sarah noticed that parents and caregivers in her group were also being affected by the experience. The usual tension that came with managing children with special needs in public spaces had melted away. For once, they weren't worried about meltdowns, inappropriate behaviors, or judgmental stares from strangers. Instead, they were simply enjoying, watching their children experience pure joy and wonder. Thunder seemed to understand that his role had expanded beyond mere ceremony. He had become a bridge between worlds, connecting these special children to something larger than themselves, while providing them with an experience of acceptance and peace. His powerful presence offered them a sense of safety and wonder that few other experiences could provide. Emma's small hand finally made contact with Thunder's warm neck, and the moment felt electric with connection. Her fingers barely spanned the width of his powerful muscles, but Thunder stood perfectly still, as if he understood the monumental courage it had taken for this little girl to reach out to him. Emma's face broke into the biggest smile her mother had ever seen, and she began to giggle with pure delight. The sound of Emma's laughter seemed to work like magic on the other children. Marcus, who had been content to observe from a distance, suddenly found the courage to step forward. His usual rigid posture relaxed as he approached Thunder's left side, his eyes still cataloging every detail, but now with wonder rather than just clinical observation. Michael watched in amazement as Marcus began to speak directly to Thunder, in a soft, clear voice. The boy shared facts about horse breeds, their history in the Royal Guard, and their role in British ceremonies. What struck Michael most was that Marcus wasn't just reciting information, he was having a conversation with Thunder, pausing as if waiting for responses and nodding as if the horse was actually answering him. Thunder's reaction to Marcus was different from his response to Emma. While he had lowered his head for the younger girl, with Marcus he maintained his full height but angled his body slightly to give the boy better access to his shoulder and neck. It was as if he recognized that Marcus needed to approach their interaction from an intellectual perspective before he could connect emotionally. David, the anxious boy who had gradually moved closer, surprised everyone by pulling out a small sketchbook from his backpack. With quick, confident strokes, he began drawing Thunder's profile. His usual nervous energy had transformed into focused artistic expression. The lines flowing from his pencil captured not just Thunder's physical form but somehow also the gentle spirit that was emanating from the great horse. Sarah noticed that other horses in the ceremonial area were also beginning to respond to the presence of the special needs group. A beautiful gray mare named Duchess, stationed about 30 feet away with her guard, had turned her head to watch the interaction. Even she seemed to sense that something extraordinary was happening. Thunder's guard companion, a chestnut gelding named Copper, was also showing unusual awareness of the group. Typically, the ceremonial horses maintained strict attention to their immediate surroundings and duties. But today, both Copper and his rider were watching the gentle drama unfolding with Thunder and the children. Sophie, the teenage girl with social anxiety, had been watching David draw and found herself inspired to participate. She approached Sarah and quietly asked if she could share a poem she had written about horses. Sarah nodded encouragingly, understanding that for Sophie, sharing her creative work was a significant step outside her comfort zone. As Sophie began to read her poem in a soft but clear voice, Thunder's ears swiveled toward her. The poem spoke of dreams and freedom, of running wild across fields under starlit skies. Her words painted pictures of horses as symbols of strength and grace, creatures who carried the hopes and dreams of those who couldn't run free themselves. The other children listened to Sophie's poem with rapt attention, and for the first time during the visit, she felt truly seen and valued by her peers. Thunder seemed to approve of her words, nickering softly when she finished reading. The sound made Sophie's face light up with joy and pride. Emma had become so comfortable with Thunder that she was now stroking his neck with both hands, marveling at the softness of his coat and the warmth of his body. She began signing to her mother about how Thunder felt like a big teddy bear, but stronger and more alive than any toy could ever be. Linda interpreted for the group, sharing Emma's observations about Thunder's gentle nature. As she signed back and forth with her daughter, other children became fascinated by the visual language. Marcus asked intelligent questions about sign language, while David began sketching Emma's graceful hand movements. Michael found himself deeply moved by the scene. These children, each facing their own unique challenges, had created an atmosphere of acceptance and wonder that even affected him. He realized that Thunder was teaching him something important about patience and unconditional acceptance, qualities that came naturally to the horse but required more effort from humans. The interaction had drawn the attention of other castle staff members who began gathering at a respectful distance. A few older guards, veterans of many years of ceremonial duty, watched with knowing smiles. They had seen Thunder work with different riders, endure long ceremonies, and maintain perfect discipline under challenging conditions. But they had never seen him display this kind of gentle wisdom. Thunder seemed to understand that he had become the center of a special community, if only for this brief time. His usual role as a symbol of royal dignity and military precision had expanded to include something more nurturing. He was providing these children with an experience of unconditional acceptance, showing them that they were worthy of respect and gentleness from one of the most magnificent creatures they might ever encounter. As the morning progressed, the children began to interact not just with Thunder, but with each other in new ways. Emma showed Marcus her signing, while he shared his knowledge of horse breeds with her. David offered to draw portraits of the other children with Thunder, while Sophie found the courage to compliment his artistic skills. The barriers that often separated children with different abilities and challenges were dissolving in the presence of this gentle giant who accepted them all exactly as they were. Thunder had become more than just a ceremonial horse. He had become a teacher, showing both the children and adults present what true acceptance looked like. As the special visit continued, more children from the group found the courage to approach Thunder. A quiet boy named James, who had cerebral palsy and used a wheelchair, had been watching from the edge of the group with intense longing in his eyes. His mother, Patricia, noticed his expression and gently wheeled him closer to the magnificent horse. Thunder seemed to sense James's approach before anyone else did. The great horse turned his head slightly and looked directly at the boy in the wheelchair. There was no judgment in Thunder's dark eyes, no reaction to the mobility aid or James's different way of moving. To Thunder, James was simply another young human who deserved his gentle attention. Michael observed this interaction with growing emotion. He watched as Thunder deliberately lowered his head until he was at James's eye level, bringing his massive face close to the wheelchair. James's eyes widened with wonder and delight, and he reached out with trembling but determined hands to touch Thunder's soft muzzle. The contact between James and Thunder created a moment of profound stillness. Even the other children stopped their activities to watch as the horse nuzzled gently against James's palm. Patricia felt tears streaming down her face as she watched her son, who faced so many daily challenges, experience this moment of pure connection and joy. Thunder's intuitive understanding of each child's needs continued to amaze everyone present. With James, he was extra careful to keep his movements slow and predictable, never doing anything that might startle or overwhelm the boy. His breathing became even more deliberate and calming, creating a bubble of peace around the wheelchair. Marcus had been taking notes in a small notebook. documenting his observations about Thunder's behavior. His analytical mind was fascinated by the horse's ability to adjust his responses to each individual child. When Sarah asked Marcus what he was writing, he explained that he was studying Thunder's emotional intelligence, noting how the horse seemed to understand what each person needed from him. David had filled several pages of his sketchbook with drawings of Thunder interacting with different children. His artwork captured not just the physical details but somehow also the emotional essence of each encounter. One drawing showed Emma's face illuminated with joy as she touched Thunder's neck. Another depicted James's expression of wonder as the horse lowered his head to meet him. Sophie had been inspired to write another poem, this one about the connections she was witnessing. She shared it with the group, describing how Thunder's gentle strength reminded her that being different wasn't something to hide but something that made each person special and valuable. As word of the extraordinary interaction spread quietly through the castle staff, a few off-duty guards came to observe. They had worked with these horses for years but had never seen anything quite like this. Thunder's transformation from ceremonial mount to gentle therapy horse was remarkable, and it happened without any training or instruction. A castle photographer, who had been documenting routine activities, asked permission to capture some photos of the special visit. Sarah checked with all the parents and caregivers, making sure they were comfortable with having this precious time recorded. Everyone agreed enthusiastically, understanding that these images would become treasured memories. Thunder seemed to sense the photographer's presence and somehow understood that he needed to remain still for the pictures. But rather than returning to his rigid ceremonial posture, he maintained his gentle, approachable demeanor. Each photo captured the genuine connection between horse and children, showing Thunder's remarkable ability to be both majestic and nurturing. Emma had become so comfortable with Thunder that she was now leaning against his sturdy leg while her mother took pictures. The trust between them was complete and mutual. Thunder stood like a statue, but a warm, living statue that radiated safety and acceptance. Emma chattered happily to Thunder in her mixed vocabulary of words and signs, telling him about her toy, horses at home, and how none of them were as wonderful as he was. James had asked his mother to position his wheelchair so he could better reach Thunder's neck. As he stroked the horse's glossy coat, he told Thunder about his dreams of riding horses someday. Thunder listened with the patience of a wise old friend, occasionally nickering softly as if encouraging James to keep sharing his hopes and dreams. The other ceremonial horses in the area had also begun to show interest in the special visitors. Duchess, the gray mare, had started watching the group with what appeared to be approval. Her guard, Corporal Davies, mentioned to Michael that Duchess seemed calmer and more content than usual, as if the positive energy from Thunder's interaction was affecting all the horses. Sarah noticed that the children were not only connecting with Thunder, but were also bonding with each other in new ways. The shared experience of meeting this magnificent, gentle creature had created common ground between children who might otherwise have struggled to relate to one another. They were comparing their experiences, sharing their different perspectives on Thunder, and showing genuine interest in each other's observations. The morning had become something none of them had expected. What started as a simple educational visit had transformed into a profound lesson about acceptance, gentleness, and the universal language of kindness that exists between humans and animals. Thunder had shown them all that real strength often comes in the form of gentleness, and that the most powerful connections happen when we approach each other with open hearts and patient spirits. As the visit approached its planned conclusion, none of the children seemed ready to say goodbye to Thunder. The magnificent horse had become more than just an attraction to observe. He had become a friend who had accepted each of them completely and unconditionally. Sarah, the volunteer coordinator, could see the reluctance in their faces and decided to extend the visit for a few more precious minutes. Thunder seemed to sense that farewell was approaching. His behavior became even more gentle and attentive, as if he wanted to give each child one final meaningful moment. He moved slowly around the semicircle they had formed, allowing each young visitor a personal goodbye that matched their individual needs and personalities. With Emma, Thunder lowered his great head once more, allowing her to wrap her small arms around his muzzle in what could only be described as a hug. Emma whispered something to Thunder that only he could hear, her words, mixing English with her personal sign language. Thunder stood perfectly still for this embrace, understanding somehow that Emma needed this physical connection to carry the memory with her. Marcus approached his goodbye from a more intellectual angle, but the emotion in his voice was unmistakable. He thanked Thunder for being such a perfect example of his breed, and for teaching him that horses had emotional intelligence beyond what he had read in books. As he spoke, Marcus gently patted Thunder's shoulder, his usual need for rigid facts, giving way to genuine affection. David had torn out his favorite sketch of Thunder from his notebook and held it up to show the horse. In the drawing, Thunder's eyes seemed to sparkle with the same gentle wisdom that the children had experienced in real life. David explained each detail of his artwork to Thunder, pointing out how he had tried to capture the kindness in the horse's expression. James asked his mother to wheel him close to Thunder one final time. The boy reached up from his wheelchair to touch Thunder's neck, telling him that meeting him had been the best day of his life. Thunder responded by gently nuzzling James's shoulder, a gesture so tender that several adults in the group had to wipe their eyes. Sophie, who had started the visit hanging back due to her social anxiety, surprised everyone by stepping forward confidently to address Thunder directly. She told him that he had helped her understand that being gentle and strong at the same time was possible, and that his example would help her be braver in social situations. Thunder's soft whinny in response seemed to acknowledge her courage. Michael found himself deeply affected by what he had witnessed. In his 12 years as a guard, he had participated in countless ceremonies, state occasions, and public events. But nothing had moved him quite like watching Thunder connect with these special children. The horse had revealed aspects of his character that Michael had never seen before, showing a depth of emotional intelligence that was truly remarkable. The castle photographer had captured dozens of images, each one telling a story of connection and acceptance. The pictures showed not just children meeting a horse, but souls recognizing something beautiful in each other. The photographer mentioned that these were some of the most meaningful photos he had ever taken during his years of documenting royal events. Other visitors to the castle had begun to notice the special interaction, and had gathered at a respectful distance to watch. Many of them were also visibly moved by what they witnessed. Some took their own photos, understanding that they were seeing something extraordinary. Others simply stood in appreciative silence, recognizing the sacred nature of what was unfolding. Thunder's fellow ceremonial horses seemed to understand that something significant had happened. Duchess, the gray mare, had moved as close as her position allowed and was watching the farewell scene with what appeared to be approval. Copper, the chestnut gelding, had also turned his attention to the group, as if acknowledging the importance of what Thunder had accomplished. Sarah realized that this visit had become something far more significant than she had planned. She had arranged many special experiences for children with diverse needs, but she had never witnessed anything quite like this. Thunder had provided these children with something that no structured therapy or educational program could replicate: the maimed experience of being completely accepted and valued exactly as they were. The parents and caregivers were also struggling with their own emotions as the visit concluded. They had watched their children, who often faced challenges and barriers in the world, experience pure joy and acceptance. For many of them, it was a reminder of their children's inherent worth and potential, seen through the eyes of a wise and gentle creature who judged no one. As the formal goodbye time arrived, Thunder seemed to understand that his special duties were concluding. But rather than immediately returning to his ceremonial posture, he remained in his gentle mode, allowing each child to take their final photos and share their last words with him. The magic of the morning had created bonds that would last far, beyond the visit itself. Each child had been changed by their encounter with Thunder, and the magnificent horse had been affected as well. He had discovered a new purpose beyond ceremony and tradition, a role that allowed him to touch lives and hearts in ways that his military training had never prepared him for. The experience had also profoundly impacted all the adults present, from the guards to the parents to the castle staff. They had witnessed something pure and beautiful, a reminder that kindness and acceptance could create miracles in the most unexpected places. The ripple effects of that magical morning began almost immediately. Word of Thunder's extraordinary interaction with the special needs children spread through the castle staff and eventually reached the attention of senior royal household officials. What had started as a simple educational visit had become something much more significant, touching hearts and changing perspectives throughout the royal establishment. Michael found that his relationship with Thunder had deepened considerably after witnessing the horse's gentle wisdom. During their regular duties, he noticed new aspects of Thunder's personality that had previously gone unrecognized. The horse seemed more responsive, more connected, as if their shared experience with the children had strengthened their partnership. In unexpected ways, Sarah received dozens of calls from other organizations and families requesting similar visits. Parents shared stories of how their children had been talking about Thunder for weeks afterward, with many showing improved confidence and social engagement since their encounter with the gentle giant. Emma's mother, Linda, reported that her daughter had been signing about Thunder every day and had started showing more interest in interacting with new people and situations. Marcus had written a detailed report about his observations of Thunder's emotional intelligence, which his teacher shared with the school. His analytical approach to the experience had helped him process the emotional aspects of the encounter, and he had begun showing more empathy in his interactions with classmates. His parents noticed that he seemed more comfortable with physical affection and was initiating social interactions more frequently. David's sketches from that day had become the centerpiece of an art project at his school. His teacher was amazed by the emotional depth he had captured in his drawings and encouraged him to continue exploring art as a way to express his feelings. David had started an entire series of drawings featuring Thunder and the other children, each piece showing his growing confidence as an artist. James had asked his occupational therapist to help him research therapeutic riding programs. His experience with Thunder had ignited a passionate interest in horses that was motivating him to work harder on his physical therapy goals. The hope of someday learning to ride had given him a concrete objective that made his daily exercises feel more meaningful. Sophie had joined a creative writing group at her local community center, inspired by the positive response to her poetry during the castle visit. Her social anxiety was still present, but she had learned that sharing her creative work could be a bridge to connecting with others. The memory of Thunder's encouraging nicker when she read her poem continued to give her courage in social situations. Thunder himself seemed changed by the experience. The castle veterinarian noticed that the horse appeared more relaxed and content in his daily routine. During regular ceremonies, Thunder maintained his professional demeanor, but there was an added quality of awareness and gentleness that enhanced his presence. Other guards began requesting to work with Thunder, sensing that something special had awakened in the magnificent horse. The castle administration decided to formalize a program for special needs visits with the ceremonial horses. Thunder was selected as the primary ambassador for these encounters, with Duchess and Copper also trained to participate. Medical professionals and animal behaviorists were consulted to ensure the program would be safe and beneficial for both the children and the horses. The photographs from that first visit were displayed in the castle's visitor center, with permission from all the families involved. The images became one of the most popular exhibits, showing visitors a side of the royal horses that most people never got to see. The pictures captured not just the interactions between children and horses, but the transformation that occurred when acceptance and gentleness met courage and determination. Michael was promoted to lead the new special visit program, a role that allowed him to witness many more magical encounters between Thunder and children with diverse needs. Each visit was unique, but Thunder's response remained consistently gentle and intuitive. The horse seemed to understand that his new role was just as important as his ceremonial duties, perhaps even more so. The program began attracting attention from around the world. Researchers studying animal-assisted therapy came to observe Thunder's natural abilities. Other ceremonial units and therapeutic riding programs sent representatives to learn about the methods being used. Thunder had become an ambassador not just for the royal household, but for the healing power of human-animal connections. Years later, Many of the children from that first visit continued to stay in touch with the program. Emma, now a confident teenager, had become an advocate for inclusion and accessibility. Marcus had pursued studies in animal behavior and psychology, inspired by his observations of thunder. David had become a renowned artist whose work often featured themes of acceptance and connection. James had learned to ride and was competing in Paralympic equestrian events. Sophie had become a published poet whose work celebrated the beauty of being different. Thunder continued his dual role as ceremonial horse and gentle healer well into his later years. The castle staff often said that he seemed to understand which role was needed in any given moment, switching seamlessly from military precision to therapeutic gentleness as circumstances required. The legacy of that first extraordinary morning lived on in the countless lives that were touched by Thunder's wisdom. The magnificent horse had shown everyone present that true strength comes from gentleness, that real nobility lies in service to others, and that the most profound connections happen when we approach each other with open hearts and patient spirits. 3C, story of Thunder and the special needs children became part of the castle's oral tradition. Passed down through generations of guards and staff members, it served as a reminder that sometimes the most important moments happen not during grand ceremonies or official events, but in quiet interactions where souls recognize something beautiful in each other. Thunder had taught them all that kindness is the greatest strength, acceptance is the highest wisdom, and love is the most powerful force in creating connections that transcend all barriers and differences.